Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Gregory Holloway never imagined a family barbecue could change his life forever. At 38, he'd built a solid career as an operations manager in Charlotte, North Carolina, overseeing logistics for a company serving clients across the southeastern U.S. His days were filled with strategic decisions, endless meetings, and coordinating teams that moved millions in goods. It was a job that demanded precision, trust, and the ability to read people and situations clearly. Ironically, all those professional skills didn't prepare him for what he was about to discover about his own wife. Amanda Holloway, 36, worked as a corporate events coordinator, organizing conferences, product launches, and executive dinners for mid- to large-sized companies in the region. She was charismatic, organized, and had a natural talent for turning ordinary events into memorable experiences. Gregory always admired her dedication to her work, how she balanced her career with family responsibilities, taking care of Tyler, 9, and Sophie, 6. Married for 11 years, they'd built a life that, to any outside observer, seemed stable and happy. They lived in a comfortable home in a quiet residential neighborhood, with a spacious yard where the kids played on weekends, and maintained a predictable routine that included family dinners, homework help, and active participation in their children's school activities. The barbecues at Amanda's parents' house had been a tradition for years. Her family was large, warm, and loud, the kind Gregory had learned to appreciate. He'd grown up in a small, reserved household, and these monthly gatherings gave him a sense of belonging he'd never known before. His father-in-law, a cheerful retiree who loved tending the grill, always had a cold beer and a funny story to share. His mother-in-law, a sweet and welcoming woman, made salads and desserts that had everyone going back for seconds. There were uncles, cousins, in-laws, and always kids running around the yard, creating a relaxed, joyful atmosphere Gregory genuinely enjoyed. That June Saturday, the sun blazed over Charlotte, and the cloudless blue sky promised a perfect afternoon for the annual summer barbecue. Gregory arrived with Amanda and the kids around noon, carrying a box of craft beers he'd bought especially for the occasion. Tyler and Sophie barely waited for the car to stop before sprinting toward their cousins, who were already playing in the yard. Amanda, wearing a light summer dress and sunglasses, beamed as she hugged her mother tightly. Gregory watched the scene with satisfaction, feeling that familiar sense of peace these gatherings always brought him. The afternoon unfolded as usual. Gregory chatted with his brothers-in-law near the grill, laughing at jokes and debating football while his father-in-law flipped the meats. Amanda moved between groups, serving drinks, laughing with her sisters-in-law, and occasionally checking her phone, something Gregory noticed only vaguely, without giving it much thought. She'd always been active on social media and kept in constant contact with clients and vendors, even on weekends. It was part of her job, or at least that's what Gregory had always believed. It was around 3 in the afternoon when Brad, Amanda's younger brother, approached Gregory. Brad was 34 and worked as a cybersecurity analyst for a tech firm. He was quiet by nature, more introverted than the rest of the family, and Gregory had always found him a pleasant but unobtrusive presence at these gatherings. This time, though, there was something different in Brad's expression. His eyes showed discomfort, maybe even anxiety, and he clutched his phone tightly, his knuckles white with tension. "Gregory, can you come here for a second? I need to talk to you privately," Brad said, keeping his voice low but urgent. Gregory immediately knew this wasn't casual small talk. He nodded, excused himself from the group, and followed Brad to the back of the yard, away from the party's noise, where a small grove of trees offered privacy. Gregory's heart began to race, an instinctive sense that something was wrong. Brad hesitated, staring at the ground, clearly struggling to find the right words. "This is really hard for me, Gregory. You're a good guy, you've always been good to Amanda and the kids. That's why I can't stay silent." He paused, took a deep breath, and finally said, "You deserve to know the truth. Amanda's cheating on you." Gregory's world stopped. For a moment, he couldn't process the words, as if they'd been spoken in a language his mind refused to translate. He felt his stomach churn, a wave of nausea rising in his throat, and had to lean against a nearby tree to keep from stumbling. "What? Brad, what are you talking about?" he managed, his voice weaker than he intended. Brad didn't look away. "3 weeks ago, Amanda asked me to help with her laptop. Said it was freezing up. I went over to your house while you were at work and she was at the kids' school. When I started troubleshooting, I noticed her phone messages were automatically synced to the laptop. The messaging app was open on the screen, and Gregory, I saw things I shouldn't have seen." Gregory felt his heart pounding in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a war drum. "What kind of things?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to hear the answer. Brad unlocked his phone and began showing screenshots he'd taken. Messages with a guy named Justin Carpenter. "I looked him up, he works with her at the events company." "Gregory, these aren't just work messages. They're intimate, explicit. Photos. Plans for hotel meetings. She schedules these when she's supposedly at corporate events." Brad scrolled through a devastating sequence of evidence, messages saying, "Can't wait to see you tonight, the downtown hotel is booked, room 412, my husband's traveling tomorrow, we can spend the afternoon together." There were photos of Amanda in lingerie, selfies clearly meant for someone other than Gregory, and conversations planning rendezvous with precise times and locations. Gregory felt his legs go weak. He took Brad's phone with trembling hands, zooming in on the images, reading every word as if in a trance. The most recent messages were from 2 days ago. 2 days. While he'd had dinner with Amanda the night before, while she'd kissed the kids goodnight, she'd been maintaining this parallel life, this devastating lie. "Why did you wait 3 weeks to tell me?" Gregory asked, his voice now filled with pain and anger. "Because I didn't know what to do," Brad admitted, his eyes glistening. "She's my sister, Gregory. I was torn, wondering if I should say something, if I should give her a chance to confess. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized you deserved to know. You don't deserve to live in this lie." Gregory felt a deep, bitter gratitude toward Brad, a man who chose loyalty to the truth over blind family loyalty. "Can you send me these photos?" he asked, his voice now steady, his natural, practical managerial side taking over. Brad nodded, and seconds later, Gregory's phone vibrated with over 24 devastating screenshots. "Thanks for telling me," Gregory said, placing a hand on Brad's shoulder. "I know it wasn't easy for you. But you did the right thing." Brad nodded, his eyes still reflecting guilt and sadness, but also relief at finally releasing the weight of the secret. Gregory returned to the barbecue, but he was a different man now. He watched Amanda with new eyes, seeing every gesture through a dark and revealing lens. There she was, laughing with her cousins, serving lemonade to the nephews, adjusting her hair as she checked her phone for the 10th time that afternoon. Every time she smiled at the screen, Gregory wondered if Justin was on the other end, if she was arranging their next meeting while he, the oblivious husband, enjoyed a family barbecue. Anger built inside him like a furnace, but he kept his composure. He wouldn't make a scene there, in front of everyone. Amanda didn't deserve that dignity, but the kids and her family did. He spent the rest of the afternoon on autopilot, answering conversations mechanically, smiling when appropriate, but internally planning every next step. Tyler and Sophie, unaware of their father's emotional storm, played happily with their cousins, and Gregory felt a sharp pang thinking about how this revelation would impact their lives. But he also knew he couldn't keep up the charade. Not after what he'd found. When it was finally time to leave, Gregory thanked his in-laws, gave Brad a firm, meaningful hug, and loaded the kids into the car. Amanda got into the passenger seat, still radiant and carefree, commenting on how fun the barbecue had been and how fast Sophie was growing. Gregory responded with monosyllables, driving in silence while his mind churned with plans and conflicting emotions. At home, the nightly routine continued as usual. The kids took baths, ate light sandwiches, watched an animated episode, and went to bed. Gregory read a story to Sophie, listened to Tyler excitedly recount a soccer game at school, kissed both foreheads, and wished them good night, his heart aching knowing how brutally their innocent lives were about to be shaken. When he came downstairs and found Amanda on the living room sofa, scrolling through her phone, still smiling at the screen, Gregory sat in the armchair across from her, hands clasped, gaze steady and penetrating. Amanda instantly sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "Is everything okay?" she asked, frowning, finally putting the phone down. "No, Amanda. Nothing is okay," Gregory replied, his voice calm but charged with dangerous intensity. "We need to talk about Justin Carpenter." Amanda's face drained of color instantly. She froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open in silent shock. I don't know who you're talking about," she stammered, but the lie was too transparent, guilt written across every feature of her expression. Gregory picked up his own phone, opened the folder of images Brad had sent, and began scrolling through them one by one, placing the phone on the coffee table so Amanda could see clearly. Messages from 3 days ago. Downtown hotel, room 412. Photos you sent him. Conversations planning meetings while I was traveling. 6 months, Amanda. 6 months of lies. His voice was controlled, but a hidden current of fury barely contained. Amanda reached for the phone, but Gregory pulled it away quickly. "No. You're going to sit there and listen. You owe me at least that after destroying 11 years of marriage." She began to cry, tears streaming down her face, but Gregory felt no pity. He felt only cold, calculated anger. "Gregory, I can explain, it's not what you think," she tried, but he cut her off with a bitter laugh. "It's not what I think. Amanda, it's all right here. Every lie, every hotel visit, every time you looked me in the eye and said you were going to a corporate event while you were actually in a hotel room with your lover. Don't insult me by denying the obvious." She switched tactics, shifting to defensive anger. "You're never emotionally present, Gregory. You live for work, always focused on numbers and reports, you never really see me." It was the classic defense, the attempt to shift blame, and Gregory had expected it. "Never present," he repeated, his voice now laced with sharp sarcasm. "I was present at every family dinner. Present at every Sophie recital, every Tyler soccer game. Present at your family's barbecues every month, smiling and being polite to everyone, while you planned your next rendezvous with Justin. I was present when you needed help with events, when you stayed up late reviewing budgets with me. But apparently that doesn't count, does it? Because you needed emotional attention, and Justin was there to provide it between work meetings." Amanda was sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. "It was a mistake, Gregory. A terrible mistake. I never wanted to hurt you. I'll end it with him, I'll go to therapy, anything. Please, for the kids, don't destroy our family." "You didn't destroy our family, Amanda. You did. You made that choice every time you lied, every time you walked into that hotel room, every time you sent an intimate photo to another man. Don't throw that back on me. And don't use the kids as a shield now. If you cared about them, you would have thought about the consequences before betraying our family's trust." He stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the dark, quiet street. "Tomorrow morning, I'm seeing a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. You can stay in the house tonight, but starting Monday, I suggest you find somewhere else to live. I'll fight for primary custody of the kids, and I have all the proof I need to secure it." Amanda stood abruptly, eyes red and swollen. "You can't take my children away from me. I'm their mother." Her voice was a desperate cry, but Gregory remained unmoved. "You're the mother who chose an affair over family stability. The courts in North Carolina will see it exactly as it is, a breach of trust that damaged the family structure. I won't prevent you from seeing Tyler and Sophie, but they'll live with me, in the stable environment I've always provided." Amanda collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably, but Gregory felt nothing but emptiness. The woman he'd loved for 11 years was a stranger now, someone capable of lying and deceiving so easily that he wondered if he'd ever really known her. He climbed the stairs without another word, locked himself in the guest room, and for the first time in years, cried. Not in despair, but in mourning for everything lost, the illusion of a happy marriage, the trust in someone he'd deeply loved, the image of a complete family he'd always imagined providing for his children. On Monday morning, Gregory woke early, made breakfast for the kids, and kept the routine normal, shielding them from the storm brewing. Amanda stayed in her room, avoiding confrontation in front of Tyler and Sophie. After dropping the kids at school, Gregory drove straight to the office of a family law attorney a colleague had recommended. David Chen, a man in his 50s with decades of experience handling divorces in North Carolina, listened patiently as Gregory laid out the entire situation, presenting the screenshots, the dates of the meetings, and the detailed timeline of the betrayal. "You have a very strong case," David said, examining the evidence with a professional eye. North Carolina still recognizes fault-based divorce, and infidelity is a factor judges consider, especially in custody and asset division. With these documented proofs and your history as a consistent, involved parent, you have excellent chances of securing primary custody. We'll need witnesses who can testify to your active role in the kids' lives and the emotional instability caused by her actions. Gregory mentioned Brad, who would certainly testify about discovering the affair and its impact on the family. He also mentioned teachers, other parents, and co-workers who could confirm his constant presence in Tyler and Sophie's lives. David began drafting the divorce petition immediately, and Gregory signed the necessary documents, feeling a mix of pain and determination. There was no turning back. The decision was made. In the days that followed, the news began to spread. Brad, feeling obligated to explain to the family why Gregory was seeking divorce, revealed the truth to Amanda's parents and siblings. The reaction was shock and disappointment. Amanda's mother cried on the phone with Gregory, apologizing on her daughter's behalf, saying she couldn't understand how Amanda could do this. His father-in-law, a man of rigid principles, became furious and refused to speak to his own daughter for weeks. Other family members, especially those close to Gregory, stood by him, offering support and solidarity. Amanda tried to reconcile a few times in the following weeks, showing up at the house at inconvenient hours, sending long messages begging for forgiveness, but Gregory held firm. He responded only through his lawyer, making it clear any communication had to be formal and documented. Amanda also faced professional consequences when the events company discovered the inappropriate relationship between her and Justin Carpenter, who was married and held a managerial position. The company's policy prohibited relationships between employees that could create conflicts of interest or hostile work environments. After an internal investigation, both were formally reprimanded. Justin was transferred to the Raleigh office, and Amanda lost several key corporate clients who didn't want their brands associated with personal scandals. The divorce proceedings moved quickly. North Carolina requires a 1-year separation period before granting divorce, but temporary custody was established within weeks. Based on the evidence presented and witnesses confirming Gregory's active involvement in the children's lives, the judge granted him primary custody of Tyler and Sophie, with Amanda entitled to regular weekend visits every other week and one evening during the week. The decision devastated Amanda, who begged for more time with her children, but the judge was clear: her actions demonstrated poor judgment that affected family stability, and the children's best interests lay in the most stable environment possible. Tyler and Sophie, initially confused by the separation, gradually adjusted to the new reality. Gregory carefully explained that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't live together anymore, but that they both still loved them very much. He never spoke ill of Amanda in front of them, protecting her image as a mother, even when he wanted to scream the truth. The kids maintained regular contact with Amanda, but they noticed the difference. When they were with their father, everything stayed the same. Routine was maintained, stability was there. When they visited their mother, who had rented a smaller apartment in downtown Charlotte, they felt the tension, the barely hidden sadness, the weight of the guilt Amanda carried. Months later, when the divorce was finalized and legal agreement signed, Gregory sat on the backyard patio of the house that was now officially his alone, watching Tyler play soccer and Sophie draw at the garden table. He thought about everything he'd lost, the illusion of a happy marriage, the trust in someone he'd deeply loved, the image of a complete family he'd always hoped to give his children. But he also thought about what he'd gained, the truth, however painful, the dignity of not living in lies, and the certainty that he'd done the right thing. Brad visited occasionally, bringing pizza and watching football games with Gregory. On those days, they talked about life, about how things had changed, but never with regret. Brad never apologized for telling the truth, and Gregory never expected him to. That revelation at the barbecue, however devastating, had been an act of courage and loyalty Gregory would never forget. Amanda, meanwhile, faced the life her choices had built. The relationship with Justin didn't survive the scandal. He returned to his wife after realizing the affair had cost him too much. Amanda lost not only her marriage, but also her family's trust, professional respect, and primary custody of her children. She saw Tyler and Sophie regularly, but there was always a distance, an invisible barrier her own actions had built, one no amount of apologies could fully tear down. Gregory rebuilt his life step by step. He continued working as an operations manager, but now with renewed focus, finding satisfaction in being a present, dedicated father. He enrolled in cooking classes to improve the kids' dinners, organized weekend camping trips, and created new traditions that replaced the old ones. He didn't close himself off to the possibility of loving again, but he wasn't in a hurry. He'd learned that trust was precious, something to be built slowly, with transparency and honesty. On an autumn afternoon, nearly a year after that fateful barbecue, Gregory was helping Sophie with homework when she looked up at him with those big, curious eyes and asked, "Dad, are you happy?" The question took him by surprise, but he didn't hesitate. "Yes, sweetheart. Dad is happy. And do you know why? Because I have you and Tyler, and we learned that the truth, even when it hurts, is always better than living in lies." Sophie didn't fully understand the depth of those words, but she smiled contentedly and went back to her math problems. Gregory looked out the window, watching leaves fall from the trees, nature's cycle of end and renewal, and felt a peace he hadn't known in a long time. The pain of betrayal would never fully disappear, but he'd learned to live with it, turning it into strength, determination, wisdom. Justin Carpenter vanished from everyone's life, returning to Raleigh and trying to rebuild the marriage he'd nearly destroyed. Amanda continued her solitary path, working smaller events, visiting her children when she could, and carrying the weight of her choices. And Gregory, the man who'd had the courage to face the truth and rebuild his life on foundations of honesty and dignity, moved forward, proving that poetic justice wasn't just an abstract concept, but a possibility for those brave enough to demand it. Brad, the brother-in-law who chose loyalty to truth over the comfort of silence, remained a loyal friend, visiting regularly and maintaining a strong bond with the kids, serving as proof that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is always worth it. And so, as the sun set over Charlotte that autumn afternoon, Gregory Holloway knew he'd survived the worst. He'd protected his children. He'd rebuilt his life with truth and dignity. There was no perfect ending, no magical reconciliation or Hollywood happy ending. But there was something more valuable: justice, truth, and the peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when everything seemed to collapse. And that, Gregory discovered, was more than enough. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.